What's happening, y'all? Corey Buschlen from Fantasy Stock Exchange coming at you to bring you the Week 15 DFS recap. It was a wild weekend of football. I'm sure those of you guys that play season long probably know that as well. But in DFS, obviously, we had a lot of outlier performances, a lot of up and down play. So we're going to get into all of that in today's video. If you guys haven't already done so, please check out the website, draftsharks.com. I write a weekly GPP picks on there for both FanDuel and for DraftKings. Lot of advice and a lot of good nuggets in those. Definitely hit on some, definitely missed on some. As always, I'm going to go over the DraftKings Millionaire Maker and the Sunday Million winner on FanDuel, as well as recap my own lineup. So let's get into it without further ado. This is the Millie Maker winner on DraftKings. And you guys can see, just as we all predicted, in case you guys needed proof why I don't play in the Millie Maker on DraftKings and this large field tournament, things in general, is because this is how it turned out with Tyler Huntley and Jeff Wilson, Deontay Foreman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all these guys leading this guy to over $1 million in prizes. Correlation wise, though, this wasn't that bad. And I will say this is probably one of the better millionaire makers we've seen in recent weeks, because what this guy did, which I really do like, is he took Tyler Huntley, he stacked him up with Mark Andrews, right? Went with the mini stack. Tyler Huntley is a mobile quarterback. You got to figure he's going to produce a bit of rushing production. So only single stacking rushing quarterbacks is definitely a good piece of advice that we can take away from this guy's lineup. So he went Tyler Huntley, Mark Andrews, also ran it back on the other side with Devontae Adams, who was expected to be a very popular play this week. And then Kirk and Amon-Ra as the mini stack, Arizona and Detroit game. He stacked up those two pass catchers. They definitely produced in that game. And then he also went with Brandon Cooks in the Texans defense, and then a one-off Jeff Wilson, one-off Deontay Foreman to close out his lineup. So overall, when you look at this guy's lineup, I really like what he did. The only high-priced and high-owned players that he played really were Brandon Cooks and Devontae Adams. Was able to get Mark Andrews sub 15%. And this was also a 9-game slate this week. So the ownership percentage is a little higher than they normally would be, because we had 2 less games because they got moved to Tuesday. So overall, anybody that's, sub 15%, I would consider good ownership. And this guy definitely built out a strong lineup with a 2% Tyler Huntley, 8% Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everything he did here was definitely great. But again, this was just one of those weeks where it's very hard to win, because a lot of random players went off. A lot of the big names disappointed. And it definitely left a lot of lineups looking like this. And this is how my best lineup on DraftKings went. And again, this one definitely hurts because my cheap plays hit, right? I started wide receivers that were cheap, like Christian Kirk, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Gabriel Davis. And those guys definitely got home for me and were able to produce. If you guys read my article, you guys know that I was a big fan of paying up at running back this week, because from all the indications, it didn't sound like a lot of people were going to pay up at running back from most of the content that I listened to and what I'd seen on Twitter and some of the bigger named fantasy players out there and DFS players. A lot of them were going to go high-priced wide receivers, low-priced running backs, guys like James Robinson, etc. And they were going to leave Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, some of these higher-priced running backs out to dry and just pay down at the running back position. So I really liked Joe Mixon and Najee Harris this week as guys that still have great ceilings because of their workloads and such, but definitely weren't able to get there in these games. Joe Mixon ended up getting hurt, which definitely didn't help, but he wasn't really producing before he got hurt, so it didn't really matter. At that point, again, nobody wanted to play these expensive running backs, so I jammed 2 of them in, differentiating my lineup. My primary stack was Kyler Murray to Christian Kirk, Amon-Ra on the way back. Again, that actually worked out pretty well. Kyler Murray, if he rushed in a touchdown or something like that, definitely would have gotten there for my lineup. Really didn't expect Michael Carter to be 29%, which is definitely a big yikes on my part. I liked Michael Carter as 4,700. I figured probably a lot of people wouldn't play him because he was coming off of an injury, but a lot of people were kind of thinking the same way that I did, that Robert Saleh was talking about giving him a big workload. Didn't even really happen to that extent. He was pretty limited, and Tevin Coleman was a guy that actually out-touched him in this game. Ownership a bit higher than usual in this lineup, but overall, like I said, I did like the strategy that I deployed. I wanted to go heavy, high-priced quarterback, high-priced running backs, and spend down at wide receiver, because there was a lot of guys in that range that I really liked. That strategy aspect of it was good, but if I had played, Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, and then maybe a different quarterback, maybe I played Josh Allen and stacked him up with Gabriel Davis, this lineup would have been a lot better. So moving on to my second lineup on DraftKings, this one was a little bit more closely in line with what a lot of people were doing. I would say Tua Tagovailoa was definitely a guy that was very popular this week. Again, I liked going against the grain with this build, though. With the high-priced running backs part of it, I played with Aaron Jones and Ezekiel Elliott on this side. Those two guys were the better of the high-priced running backs, but still not worth the salary that you had to pay up for those guys. 4.1% and 3.3% for those guys in terms of ownership, though, I will take that every day of the week. They only produce like a middling fantasy performance relative to the two ceilings of those two players. But nonetheless, I do like playing those guys at sub 5% ownership, even on a 9-game slate. Deontay Johnson, a very popular play for a lot of people. He didn't really cash in for me, 22.8% ownership and only produced 9 fantasy points for 7,500 salary. Definitely not what I wanted to see there. Deontay Johnson had traditionally been a guy that would just get a boatload of targets. And that seemed like a very safe option for me, especially on DraftKings, where you get the 100-yard bonus, where it is a full point PPR format. Definitely benefits a guy like Deontay Johnson, just not exactly the type of production that you wanted to see out of him. Christian Kirk, again, I really liked as a one-off play this week. He definitely hit. And like I said, with Tua Tagovailoa, he was very popular this week. And a lot of people who played Tua Tagovailoa would have stacked him with the chalkiest receiver on the slate, which was Devontae Parker, who ended up hitting. But Devontae Parker was a chalk play that I wanted to fade. So I went with Myles Gaskin, who's a pass-catching running back, which we've seen work in recent weeks for a lot of lineups. Leonard Fournette, stacked up with Tom Brady, etc. And Mike Gesicki, who I really like the tight end this week. I wanted to stack those three up to get a contrarian stack away from Devontae Parker, because if the Devontae Parker chalk didn't hit, maybe Myles Gaskin catches a touchdown, maybe Mike Gesicki catches a touchdown, so on and so forth. So I stand by that decision, because Devontae Parker came in around 40% ownership depending on the contest. And when you get a player that's that highly owned, if he doesn't hit and you don't play him, then you're going to knock out a big portion of the competition, even if they are a low-price player like Devontae Parker was this week. And the fact that I was able to stack up Tua in a contrarian way, not playing Devontae Parker, was something I was willing to do. Didn't work out for me, though, of course. And like I said, with Christian Kirk, I like the one-off play of him. And I also liked Marvin Jones as a one-off play this week. Definitely didn't work out there. So moving on to FanDuel, and the FanDuel lineup, again, also wasn't as bad as it looks in terms of how the ownership shaked out and how this guy's strategy played out, because it was pretty similar to the Sunday or to the Millionaire Maker lineup, because there was not a whole lot of fantasy production in this one. So a lot of the same players showed up multiple times. This lineup, though, isn't as gross as it looks. We took the Tyler Huntley, Mark Andrews, and Devontae Adams stack. Again, Devontae Adams coming in at 50% ownership in the Sunday Million contest is definitely wild. And also highly played James Robinson coming in at 47.7%. If you guys read my article, you know that I was fading James Robinson this week, because that ownership I knew was going to be very, very high. He was projected for about 42% ownership, came in around 47% in this contest. Again, he was a good play objectively on paper. If he doesn't get into the end zone, he probably doesn't have that great of a game. But James Robinson at 47%, I was willing to fade that all day, every day. And in some smaller field contests, he was coming in 60, 70% ownership. And I'm just not going to play a player at that high priced ownership. And then Jeff Wilson, Deebo Samuel, and San Francisco, all that correlation. You get the running aspect of the San Francisco 49ers. You get Deebo Samuel, of course, contributes on the ground. Jeff Wilson, the primary running back, and the 49ers defense. I guess this guy looked at this game and was like, you know what, the 49ers are going to blow out the Falcons. They're going to run it all over them. And that's basically how he stacked up his lineup. So good thought process there. And then the J-Rob chalk unfortunately hits, right? I faded James Robinson. A lot of people faded James Robinson at the 47% he came in. And again, 60, 70% in most small field contests. So I will do that every single time. If I see a running back who is going to get steamed up to 50, 60% ownership, there's no chance I'm playing him, because if that chalk misses, we are playing for first place, right? I'm not trying to min cash in these contests, because playing James Robinson chalk and it hits will get you closer to min cashing, but I am trying to climb the leaderboards. I'm trying to come in first, second, third, whatever the case is. So if the James Robinson chalk missed, then I would have climbed the leaderboards big time, because a lot of people played James Robinson. And if he had dropped 4 points, then their lineups would have been sunk, and he would have anchored a lot of their lineups. And then again, a one-off Christian Kirk and a one-off Brandon Cooks to close out that lineup. So great job to that guy. Congratulations on the $250,000 that he ended up winning. This was the only lineup that I had this entire weekend that actually min cashed, and it was a Davis Mills stack. Now, if you guys read my article, you know that I was touting the Davis Mills stack this week as one that actually had a sneaky high ceiling, because the Jacksonville Jaguars were one of the worst defenses in the league against the pass. Davis Mills had actually shown twice so far this season that he's capable of producing 20 plus fantasy points on FanDuel. So I really like Davis Mills. Brandon Cooks mini stack is what I went with there. Ran it back on the other side of things with Marvin Jones. And I did fade James Robinson. I could have easily went Davis Mills, Brandon Cooks, and then ran it back with James Robinson, which would have actually worked out for me. But again, I'm not playing James Robinson at that high ownership. I went with Marvin Jones as the pivot away from James Robinson. Didn't work out for me, but the Mills to Cook stack actually does hit. 0.9% ownership on Davis Mills for a 15-point quarterback. I'll take that every day of the week. And then Brandon Cooks, 12% with stacked up with his quarterback. I'll definitely take that as well. I needed the big Adams game. I needed the big Deebo Samuel game. I needed Kyle Pitts to actually have a big game in this one. in order for all this lineup construction to work out for me. Joe Mixon as well didn't necessarily get there. I went with a Kyle Pitts, Deebo Samuel mini stack as well. I thought that would be a sneaky high scoring game. It was for the San Francisco side of things, but it was not for the Kyle Pitts side of things. And also Jeff Wilson obviously having the big game hurts Deebo Samuel, because I figured if there was going to be rushing production, Deebo Samuel would get that. I really do like the construction of this lineup, though, to be honest, because I liked the way I went contrarian at Davis Mills, was able to eat some chalkier plays like Devontae Adams, like Joe Mixon. I suppose because I was playing a Davis Mills stack, I could have played James Robinson in this lineup, because I'm getting access to the James Robinson ceiling while also playing a contrarian way of getting access to the James Robinson ceiling, which is what we've seen from Sunday Million lineup winners in weeks past. They've played a chalky running back or wide receiver, but they've also stacked them up with some other pieces to help them differentiate their chalky play versus other people's chalky plays. So that's maybe something I could have done differently in this lineup. The Steelers defense, a one-off play that I really like this week. So that's everything, guys. If you guys did enjoy this video, again, like, comment, subscribe to the Draft Sharks YouTube channel. Check out the Draft Sharks website for a lot of the showdown content that we have going. We have Tuesday Night Football tomorrow as you guys are watching this right now, so you guys can check out the showdown content that we'll have over there. And also stay tuned for next Saturday when my GPP lineup advice drops for FanDuel and for DraftKings as usual. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.